It's Tom Morgan with Lucy Martens today, and I have rarely been so excited for a conversation as this one. I have this obsession that the role of elders, Indigenous elders and wise elders, has been almost completely neglected from the Western media landscape. And if you don't believe me, just try and name the wisest elder in contemporary content that you can. And one of the amazing things about having started Leading Edge is that I've been introduced to remarkable people. And my sister introduced me to Lucy recently. Lucy's projects as a filmmaker have been about finding and amplifying the voices of Indigenous elders, which I think is not only fascinating, but incredibly urgent. And I wanted to talk to her today about her current project and what we as a community can do to help. So with that, Lucy Martens, please introduce yourself, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much, Tom. Yes, so I'm Lucy Martens, and as Tom just already said, I'm a filmmaker for the last 20 years, been working in documentaries, but very much the last 7 years focusing on Indigenous voices. And I pretty much slipped into it. I was working on a project in the Middle East, and then a friend asked me, what's the next film you would like to work on? And I said, I would just love to work with Indigenous people. And that night I bumped into an old friend who was telling me about a group of people who were looking for 12 Indigenous elders to bring them to the UN in New York, and were looking for a filmmaker. And I'm like, oh gosh, I will be totally up for that. And yeah, that's how I then got onto the project The 12, which was the film I filmed and co-directed with the Ciel Foundation 6 years ago. And for a year filming and yeah, just meeting 12 Indigenous elders from every corner of the world was so life transformating that since then I've been very much focusing on to amplify the voices of elders and those who speak the voice of nature, which are essentially Indigenous people today. So that's how I got into it. And yeah, it's really much has changed my worldview. And I think with that, I've also found a niche that has kind of moved me away from like a kind of a documentary filmmaker looking at a lot of different topics. It's really been like looking at Indigenous wisdom, not only from the perspective of elders, but like also looking at regeneration, or how do we connect to nature? How do we connect to the cosmos? And really going to kind of holistic and more interconnected way of living and being.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you're currently working on the project EarthElders. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the EarthElders is a council of now 13 elders from around the world, and next year to be 52 elders from all over the world who are going to be representing 52 bioregions. And in 2013, there were 100 elders from around the world who gathered in the Sierra Nevada in Colombia to look at the state of the planet, because they were really feeling that, that the earth is not well. So after having multiple ceremonies, they had realized that we are in the time of the eagle and the condor, which is about unification, and that if we continue being on this one path, we are going to destroy the earth and essentially then also humanity. So that also meant that it was a time for elders to start speaking out and to spread their wisdom, because that's really what's needed right now. And I know that you work a lot with Ian McGilchrist and the whole thing about bringing balance between the left and the right brain. And this is very much what the prophecy is about. How can we bring in balance again, and a more holistic way of living and being, and not just about growth and intellect and pushing and taking, but how can we go back into a circular way of being? And a word that Indigenous use a lot, which I think is so important, is the concept of reciprocity. So how can we, whatever we take from nature, how can we give back? Whatever we take from someone, how can we give back? So really go more into circular ways of being instead of linear. And that you can obviously apply with all facets of life. Like, how do we look at time? How do we work? How do we look at health, education? So it's really about working together now. So it's not about going back to, being in the bush or in the cave or in the jungle, but how can we use this primordial wisdom that Indigenous people still hold, or at least those still hold who have still unbroken lineages and have been working with their own elders or have been the indigeneity, how can that be bridged with people from the more modern world who really want to work with Indigenous together? So they say it's all about, those people have the same heart vibration. Those are the ones who need to come together now. So it's not really about skin color or your wealth or your education. It's like, where's your heart? And work together on, moving forward.
Talking about heart, the moment I read about the eagle and the condor prophecy, I was like, blimey, oh my God, this is just another framing of the same dynamic that I've been reading and learning about for the last 10 years. Could you just give a quick primer as to what it says and where we are?
So the eagle and the condor is just a totem form of explaining the separation that humanity has been in. So that's a Mesopotamian interpretation of the prophecy. But when you speak to people in Africa or like in Australia or in Northern Europe, they would have different totem animals. So in Africa, it would be the lion and the elephant, for example, who are just representing different energies. And it kind of shows that humanity at some point went into separation. So 500 years ago, for example, with the colonialization of indigenous people in South America, it was that, like very literally the North came and dominated the South and dominated indigenous people, and saw their ways of living and seeing was an inferior way. So everything was suppressed, like nature or intuition or the feminine, and very much this kind of like northern, or let's say like modern mindset has been dominating the world. But in the prophecy, so they saw that this was going to happen 500 years ago, and now 500 years later, they call it Pachacuti. It's like a new time that is starting. So from 2013 up into 2026, there is a cleansing process that's going on. So there's a new energy that's coming onto the planet, because the planet or the Earth is also moving through the cosmos and is also a living being that is also going through its own evolution. And because we are, if you believe that we are part of nature and part of this planet, we are also going through an evolution. And this is something that you can't stop, because it's just a different energy that is now, that is coming onto this Earth. And that's why there's so much kind of shifts happening in this period. So they believe before the new era can begin in 2026, or the new dawn, how they call it, a lot of things have to break away first. And that is, and that's everything. But it's obviously the governments and everything that's not aligned anymore with nature or the universal laws. But everything that's happening externally is also happening internally. One could say that a lot of people are also questioning certain lifestyles and questioning themselves and questioning maybe there are different ways of being, or is this really like the way I want to live, or am I really happy, or is this really a purposeful way of living and being? And that is because there is a new energy coming in. So I don't know, I personally have been feeling or seeing a lot of people waking up, and but they also say it is a living prophecy. So it's not going to happen because it's going to happen. It will only happen if there are enough people who wake up. And that is also being pushed by the Earth, who is a living being, and she's going for this evolution. So indigenous people say, it's not about climate change. It really is about a lack of harmony. So the Earth is just kind of like shaking and showing us that she's not happy. And through that is also a process of pushing people to wake up. What is happening with the climate, for example. So if that's true, there are really beautiful times coming ahead. But before that, there needs to be a lot of cleaning up first.
Almost everyone listening to this will have a deep sense of resonance with that and agree. And so let's get down to it. How can we help you? What do you need?
So I think, first of all, thank you for asking. And I think Indigenous projects in general need to be funded. There is like slowly coming more into people's consciousness that the way or the knowledge that they have is important, but it's happening too slow, especially with the EarthElders who received in the ceremonies that I was talking about. They received 5 earth mandates. which they need to fulfill over the next years. And one of them is building a council, which they've already achieved from going from 7 till 13. And next year they want to be 52. So that needs funding in order just to, bring these elders together. And another mandate is to build houses of original thought in these 52 bioregions. So those are basically educational centers to reconnect to the indigenous and ancestral wisdom of the land in each area. That we're not only focusing on Western education, but that we're also focusing on the plant medicine, or like how can we actually learn from the mountain or river, and like really go back into a much more holistic way of learning. So they want to build these centers, and that they're all centered around a fire, which they believe that everything, starts with a fire and the conversations, and that you start teaching the children and the grown-ups about learning from nature again. So that's one of their missions. Then they work on protecting natural sacred sites, which they've also been already working on, and they need to continue to work on, which they have also identified different places. Like in 3 weeks, we're actually going to Mount Fuji with 2 of the elders, and also to go filming, because for them, sacred sites are like the energetic points of the earth. So if you believe that the earth is like a body, like the human body is, we also have certain energy points like chakras, for example. And if they're blocked, or if they're not respected, then you become sick. And that's the same with these sacred sites around the world, that they have been misused and neglected, or been blocked, like through either tourism or mining, because there's always a lot of biodiversity around these sites, or there's no ceremonies anymore, no rituals. So part of their mission is to go and protect these natural sacred sites, and to do a ceremony, but also create learning centers around, so you learn about the importance of them, and then essentially actually guard them to protect them. So there would be like Mount Shasta, for example, in the US, or Uluru in Australia, just to give some examples. Then the Earth Elders are also buying land back in order to protect it from nature, and to rewild it, and also to put it under the guardianship of the elders who are responsible for that bioregion, to just give it time to restore itself. And so it's protected from mining and deforestation, etc. And then another mandate of theirs is to go to places like the UN at COP, to actually speak the voice of Mother Earth, and to be able to be part of the policy change. So for years already, indigenous people have been going to the UN and to places like COP, or any kind of climate conference, to really bring in another perspective of looking at climate change, and why it's so important to bring in the voices of indigenous people. So the Earth Elders are also doing that. And then, we're working on a film to bring out their messages, to really amplify their voices, and to really help to create policy change.
The last 20 years of my career around tens upon tens of billions of capital, and capital that increasingly has a conscience. And looking through your work and listening to your words, I just hear a word, which is leverage, which is that this strikes me as incredibly high impact, high leverage project, where you're getting the awareness through the documentary, and then you're actually on the ground through leverage points themselves in terms of the elders. So I'm hopeful that this message will reach people, given that there's so much good potential good to be done with the amount of captive assets looking for quote unquote impact within particularly family offices. So I do hope that finds them. For people that were participating in this, what do you think their individual involvement could be in any of the projects?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'm also speaking for the elders, so I need to also circle back and check. But I think, as I was saying, the prophecy, or the way, especially this council is working, it's all about collaboration and reciprocity from both sides. So, so how can, if someone wants to give contacts or funding or anything, how can they give back? And a lot of it is obviously knowledge exchange, or could be, meeting some of the elders, or being part of building these educational centers, which I think, would be a beautiful project to be part of. Or having the name on the film. I mean, it really is also a personal thing for each one. Like what does actually matters, what matters to them, and what is their concept of reciprocity. So I think that's something to explore.
I have to ask a question. All the way through reading all this stuff, I was like, how did you find the elders and how did they find each other?
So with the EarthElders, so Mendahi Bastida, who was he's basically the convener of the Eagle and the Condor Council, and he is from Mexico. So he attended these ceremonies in the Sierra Nevada in 2013. So he has been working with his own teachers and guides, and through a specific kind of selection or guiding process, they've been finding and selecting these elders from around the world. So it is not only like, reading someone's CV, it is also going into ceremony and checking with spirit. So that's how they also, put the council together. And I think what's also interesting, sorry.
No, please go.
No, just know what I find interesting about this council is that each of the elder really does represent also, or knows how to walk in both worlds. So they're all like, deeply cosmic and connected to their lineages, but also have like PhDs or like, live in a city or have been to like the COPs. So they really know how to walk and talk in both worlds. And that again is kind of like, the eagle and the condor prophecy, like being able to balance both energies. That makes sense.
This is weirder rabbit holes I've gone down, but I think for us in the West, we regard shamanism as a guy wearing furs and beating a drum and a relic of magical thinking. But there's a chap called Peter Kingsley, who's this kind of mystic and classicist who is by far the most interesting person I've read really since McGilchrist. And one of his central themes, to my mind, is that basically one of the greatest unspoken taboos in Western civilization is that actually there's a mystical heart that was seeded by a shaman. Actually, he thinks a shaman from Mongolia, and then was like steadily repressed because one, we'd have to take responsibility for ourselves, but also it kind of violates most of our materialistic assumptions. And my reading of Kingsley is that he believes that Carl Jung was himself kind of a shamanic prophet, but Jung realized very early on that if he started telling people what he'd seen, they wouldn't believe him, and that actually he needed to dress everything up in the language of science. And what I've seen so far is that this kind of eagle and condor is manifesting at the moment in terms of people trying to reconcile a scientific worldview with the mysticism. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Indeed, probably the most interesting thing I've read on this topic over the last few years has been the conclusion of Richard Tarnas's Epilogue of the Western Mind, which I think I shared with Epilogue of the Passion of the Western Mind, where basically he's like, this departure from the feminine was supposed to give us a stronger masculine grounding so that when we came back to the feminine, we could do it from a place of more equal union. When I read about the Pachacuti and I read about this prophecy, like it really struck me that this was actually a really optimistic vision. Again, it's a participatory vision. Like we can still screw this up, but it was a very optimistic vision. Whereas I feel like a lot of our institutions kind of decay, like we're kind of overcome with this negativity, and actually participation in this project was something that was inherently optimistic. And that was a very new vision for me.
Yeah. Yeah, the optimism is so important right now, I think, because we can't just be about doom and gloom. And if you don't have optimism, you don't really have any energy or power. So I think something I've really learned from being around elders is that they are just so much fun, that they are, you see like everything that they've been through, like the colonialization and like the land grabbing and everything, but they're just like still so kind. And when they come together, it's just like actually so much fun. And I think that's what I enjoy most of being around Indigenous elders, is that they just know how to be. I think, just being like so fully authentic and not having to prove anything, and just being, very centered in their kind of ways of being, and just enjoying the moments. And even though they can see obviously everything that's happening around and seeing a lot of destruction, but there's just a deep, deep trust. And I think because they just have such a different connection to the earth and the cosmos and to their lineages and the way they see death and life, or the way they see, yeah, I guess the future or the past is a very different way than we see things, because we're just so obsessively holding on to and stuff can also be memories, or stuff can also be things that we want for the future. So they know the only thing that they can do is walk step by step in the best way possible, and that's how you create the future, and not, you know, not hold on to any expectations, because all you can do is do the best that you can do now, and do it with the right intentions and the right integrity and the right values and the right protocols, and then, you know, take people on board while you walk along. And I can see or say from experience that over the last years, I can really, you know, when you have an elder in a room, that people do gravitate to them just by like sensing some kind of energy that they have, and they might not know why. But I think it's just this feeling of someone who just stands really straight and doesn't need to say anything, or doesn't need to comment, or doesn't need to prove anything. And they just are. And there's just so much to learn from that, and just living in trust and living, really doing one step at a time, and giving thanks to nature and thanks to life, and just being a bit more present in this world. So that already is a good place to start, I think. And if we're not optimistic, you know, what's the point?
It's funny you said that. I just recently interviewed her. She describes herself as a teacher of presence, and I was sitting with her, and I'm the least present person ever. And I was like, oh, I think this is what we're playing for. I think this is the point, which is the ability to be totally present in the moment with your loved ones, or with, you know, whatever is most important at that moment, and be able to give your attention to that. And I feel that when you think reciprocity, and you think what these people can give you, maybe that, right? Maybe the ability to just be totally authentic and totally centered, no matter what's going on around us. And maybe, I mean, it seems like you definitely learned that from them, and maybe that's something that we can take from this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I still struggle a lot. I know I did learn a lot. And I actually, yeah, I mean, you know, I also grew up in Germany and in Hamburg, and I was very, very suspicious. And when I, you know, was saying earlier, when I went on this trip on the 12, and I was struggling so much that whole year, because I was always in the back of my head, like, oh my God, no, you can't talk about spirit. This is ridiculous. Or like, you can't. And I was just, I can't show this in a film. This would be like so embarrassing. And, you know, the more and more you are around people like that, the more you start crumbling and surrendering. And I can only say from my own journey that I have learned, yeah, so much, and just being in the presence. And I can only say that's a huge gift.
In the 12, you had this remarkable Gabonese man, who I felt was like the star of the show. I really strongly recommend everyone watches the 12. And what was interesting is not only was he kind of hilarious and like fun, as your point, but also everything he was saying was remarkably consistent with the stuff I've been learning from sort of these weirder esoteric sources like Christian mysticism. And like maybe he's just reading the same things. But for me, it struck me that what was really interesting is when you get wildly diverse indigenous groups who've never had any contact with each other together. They're all basically saying the same thing. And as someone who's, you know, an ex-finance guy, it's all pattern recognition. And like, there's the value, right? You see all these people, and like, if they're all saying the same thing, that probably means something. It's probably not a coincidence. And if you get 52 of them together and they're all saying the same thing, that probably means something too, right? I don't know. Has there been a lot of consistency in the message that you're hearing from these people?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I think actually, yeah, the Gabonese guy says it in the film too, that I mean, indigenous wisdom it's the primordial wisdom that was born before time, that has always been there. And it's just something that has been, you know, kept in the lineages and been passed down, and that you can still tap into as well when you reach a point where you can start communicating with nature, or where you just, you know, drop into nature and you get messages back, which is just very, very deep, and always, I wouldn't say simple messages, but like actually quite clear messages of like how to yeah, how to be with nature and how to just like, questioning, well, what's beyond the sky? What goes beyond, what is this cosmos that we're floating in? Just like asking questions. And once you start asking questions, like things may come to you either in books or like the people you meet. And it's just about opening up to like this very kind of linear and like tunnel vision that we've kind of developed. And yeah, it is really, really amazing to see. I was in March, I was filming with another Indigenous container called the Earthrise Collective, which was born in South Africa, and it was over 50 elders as well who came together to yeah, to kind of exchange knowledge, to sit together and see like, what kind of activism can they live, what kind of alternative solutions are there out there based on Indigenous knowledge systems. And even though they all have like different rituals or different songs or different costumes, the essential wisdom or the way they see the world is the same. The values are the same. There might be different protocols in different traditions, but it is about community. It's about reciprocity. It's about we are nature. It's about being in joy, being in the presence, and really seeing that we as family are one humanity, and we are here to actually protect and guard the earth and not to take. And that's, I think, been like the most, well, destructive knowledge really that has also come with monotheistic religions, that we are here to take from nature, and that is detrimental, obviously, to us and the planet. So, yeah.
So you speak so beautifully, and I feel incredibly grateful that we were connected. Thank my sister. Before we leave, where can we find more about you? Any last words for us? How can we help? I know you've already said what you need. Anything we need to know?
Well, I don't know if you would like to share our teaser of the EarthElders that we made from their first gathering, which is like an 8-minute teaser when the council met with the 13 the first time last year in Chile. Also, the 12 is out there online. It's always been out there for free because we believed it's not our film. This is the film of the elders. So the film was always accessible to watch online, and it's beautiful to see how it's like, yeah, just slowly spreading, and that more and more people are waking up to the importance of this knowledge. And then we obviously have a website and a film treatment and all kinds of documents. So happy to share all of that.
Right. Yeah. And if you are interested in this, please contact me or Lucy, and we can try and bring some good into the world. Lucy Martens, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.